Welcome to Living Outside the Matrix, the show where we explode the many modern myths of today and where we examine important issues that pertain to our lifestyle choices that are either ignored or misrepresented by the mainstream media. Hi there, I'm your host, Nigel Howitt, and on the show today, we're going to look at the phenomenon of grounding, or sometimes known as earthing, the idea of being electrically connected to the earth. And with me to discuss this is author Martin Zucker from California in the USA, who co-authored the book Earthing, probably the most important health discovery ever, along with Dr. SInatra and Clinton Ober. Martin, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, and a very warm welcome to the show.
Thank you, Nigel. It's my pleasure to be with you.
Martin, can you give us a broad synopsis up front, really, to sort of explain to the listeners what exactly is this thing called earthing or grounding?
Sure. Basically, think of it this way: we have the sun in the sky. It's a big ball in the sky, and the sun provides us with warmth, and it provides us with vitamin D. There's also another big ball that we're very intimately associated with, the ball that we live on, called the Earth, planet Earth. And the planet Earth has electrical frequencies in the ground, in the water, in the land masses. And this electric nutrition, you could describe it as, provides us with something that is only now being researched and found to be of great significance for health. And that is when we are in contact with these electrical frequencies in the ground, by being barefoot outside or being indoors in contact with specially conductive products such as conductive mats or patches or sheets, we are absorbing this energy from the earth. And just like the sun gives us energy in the form of vitamin D and warmth, so too the earth, if we are in contact with it, gives us this energy, which turns out to be, according to new emerging science, very healing and very important for health. Now, most humans today are not in contact with the earth that we live on because we wear shoes that insulate us from the ground. We don't sleep on the ground anymore. We don't walk barefoot on the ground, so we're not in contact with the earth. We live on the earth, but we're not in electrical contact with the earth. And the difference between being in contact and not being in contact can make a big difference on your energy level and on your health. So that basically is what grounding is all about. It's reconnecting people to the planet that they live on.
Well, it does sounds like it makes sense right up front, really, doesn't it? Because, evolutionarily speaking, obviously, as you've just briefly alluded to there, we've evolved in contact with the Earth. So it stands to reason that there's going to be some crucial components there that we're going to benefit from. So how did you discover this whole phenomenon? What brought it to your awareness?
Well, I'm a health writer. I personally didn't discover anything, but I was working with a holistic cardiologist named SInatra, and SInatra is an American cardiologist and very interested in alternative medicine, in vibrational medicine, and he became aware of the work of Clinton Ober. Clinton Ober was a pioneer in the United States in the cable television industry. He's not a scientist, and he made a discovery about 20 years ago that when you are in contact with the ground, that creates a whole different physiology. Your body, the nervous system goes from stressed sympathetic mode to parasympathetic relaxed mode. And he also found that it reduced his own pain level. Here was a person who, because of skiing injuries and other injuries, needed a painkiller to go to sleep every night. And he saw that people were disconnected from the earth, insulated from the earth by the shoes that they wear. In other words, the shoes, today's shoes, are not leather like in the past where we wore leather shoes. Today, the shoes are made all from plastic and rubber, and they insulate you from the earth's electric field. And by being disconnected from that electric field, he believed could allow you to become somewhat dysfunctional as far as health is concerned. And so he tested it with using conductive duct tape on his bed. And he laid on this, he connected to the duct tape to a ground rod that he put into the ground outside the window. And he fell asleep without any need for a painkiller. And he wondered, he didn't know what this was. What did this mean? And he kept repeating this experiment and finding that he could fall asleep without using a painkiller. So he went to various friends of his who had sleep and pain problems and did the same experiment with them. And he found that they had the same response. They slept better. They didn't need the painkillers. Their pain levels went down. And he wondered, what was this? I mean, he looked around for research. He found there was no research. So he decided to do his own research, and he engaged some researchers to look into it. And now 20 years later, there's about 20 to 25 studies, small studies, but showing very intriguingly that when you are in connection with the earth, it reduces inflammation in your body, reduces pain, improves blood flow, improves your sleep, improves your energy level, balances out your hormones, many, many different observations and findings through this research. And so earthing grounding really refers to the discovery of great, important, significant, I can't find words for it, healing and health and healing benefits. When you are in contact with the earth provides you with this healing energy. And most of us today are disconnected from the earth. We wear insulating shoes, and we don't sleep on the ground anymore. We don't work on the ground. We don't stand on the ground barefoot. And we live in high rises. We work above the ground. We live above the ground. We're disconnected from the earth's healing frequencies.
It sounds as though it began with simple observation of the empirical evidence. He found that this connection worked, and then he noticed, of course, it worked with other people. And then you mentioned that it's subsequently been backed up with a number of scientific studies. I believe he's funded and did a lot of the studies himself, didn't he? Has he done about 12 studies or so?
No, there's about 25 now, and one of the studies was really interesting. I mean, they're all interesting because they're all groundbreaking. These are all groundbreaking studies. There's been no research on this subject before. We believe that in past cultures that people were connected to the earth because they walked barefoot, they lived on the earth, and they slept on the earth. And but that has changed. Excuse me. That has changed in recent times.
In much the same way that our diet doesn't bear much resemblance to what we're genetically adapted to consuming, it makes sense when we observe the modern Western lifestyle, and as you've mentioned, how disconnected from the earth we are with footwear and with the whole sort of indoor living thing. Over here in the UK, pretty much many people don't even have any garden worth speaking of. Gardens have been shrinking. People have come inside, and there is a complete lack of connection with the earth. And we've seen that there's been a commensurate rise, or certainly a rise at the same time, of this plethora of modern chronic diseases. So Clinton Ober, he discovered a connection between these, did he?
Yes, he did, and you're absolutely right. We at this point we can only suggest that we don't know if it's coincidental or a consequence of being disconnected from the earth, because you see conditions like diabetes, which has been soaring for the last 50 years, autoimmune disorders, multiple sclerosis, lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, just soaring. And it could be related to diet. It could be related to lack of physical exercise. But we think an overlooked factor here is that people are not connected to the earth. So they're missing this nature's design that people evolved connected to the earth, and it keeps the body in order. There's order in the body. Inflammation is contained. And we believe, frankly, that if you are grounded 24/7, you can't have inflammation in the body. And researchers today are saying that inflammation is the major cause of these chronic disorders that you mentioned. So yes, we believe that from being a baby, from childhood, from infancy to your senior years, you should be grounded. There was an interesting study by Pennsylvania State University doctors, intensive care doctors, found that by grounding premature infants, these are the most fragile of humans, very fragile, that by grounding them, connecting them to the ground, just by putting a patch like this on their skin, connecting that with a wire to the grounding or earthing system, as you would say in the UK, to the earthing system of the hospital, that they saw almost 7% increase in the autonomic nervous system function of the body of these premature infants, meaning that they were probably more viable, more resistant to stress and inflammation. So that was a big finding, to have these premature infants, very fragile, had that kind of an increase in their resistance, in their viability. So yeah, the research is slowly coming out proving the importance of grounding, the importance of earthing to the health of the human organism.
Yeah. Yes, it's widely acknowledged, isn't it, that inflammation is the root cause of almost all disease, if not all disease. And inflammation, when we look at the mechanism of it, the build-up of positive charge, it does make a lot of sense that the free access, if you like, to the electrons from the Earth, which is essentially what happens. Correct me if I'm wrong, and please elaborate. But my understanding is that when we are in contact with the Earth, we avail ourselves to this huge reservoir of surplus electrons, which is negative charge. And it makes sense that with the human immune system would benefit from all these this negative charge to counter the build-up of reactive oxygen species, the positive charge, which is the situation with chronic inflammation. Would you agree?
Yes, yeah, you're absolutely right. This is our hypothesis. Nobody has seen an electron, but we know that they're just too small. These are subatomic particles. But we know, science knows that the negative electric charge of the planet is based on, as you describe it, a reservoir, an unseen and virtually limitless reservoir of electrons. And electrons have a negative charge. And when you're barefoot outside, your body has the ability through your feet to absorb these electrons. They come into your body, and you may not be getting enough in your diet electrons, because electrons are really antioxidants. So they're coming into your body through some of the food that you eat, and they're snuffing out these free radicals that cause inflammation, right? So they're doing that. But apparently we're not eating enough electron-rich food, so we suggest that there's a deficiency of electrons in modern man, which is creating these chronic illnesses. If you can be in contact with the earth, absorb this huge amount of electrons from the Earth, unlimited, not like the amount in a blueberry or in green vegetables, but you're getting this huge, you can tap into this unused, limitless supply. That's going to come into your body. Your body will use what it needs to snuff out all this unnatural, abnormal stuff going on in there, snuff out the activity of these free radicals, and your inflammation level will come down, and your pain level will come down, because pain is based primarily on inflammation. So people have been doing this, have been doing the earthing now for 20 years. Pretty much across the board, they report less pain. So they sleep better, they feel better. The world itself, Nigel, is the biggest anti-inflammatory on the planet. That's the thing, that when you think about it, the planet itself is the original anti-inflammatory, the original painkiller, the earth itself. That's a mind blower.
It is, isn't it? I remember hearing Dr. SInatra mention that we'd have to be eating handfuls of antioxidants in order to get the same benefit as you can from this free supply of electrons coming up from the earth, literally through our feet. There are admittedly, other causes of inflammation, inherent in our lifestyle these days in the Western world. There's been a lot attributed to leaky gut and diet causing inflammation, sugar in the diet causing inflammation, all these other factors. But it does seem logical and reasonable that the inflammation is going to be countered by this, free donation of electrical charge. I think it was Clinton Ober who was describing one of his experiments, which goes back to what you were saying about these chronic diseases such as diabetes, and I think his experiment, listeners might be interested to know a little bit about the evidence behind this. That he had some lab rats that he kept on, and he was feeding them identical diets. They were kept in identical conditions. They apparently come from some other experimentation. They were going to be disposed of, but he kept these animals on and he let them live their lives out. And he simply separated the two into one set that were grounded, that were earthed, and the other set that weren't. And he was reporting things like increased level of triglycerides in the blood of the ungrounded mice, and also an increase in the blood sugar, interestingly, and a 10% increase in the obesity of the ungrounded rats, which is it does really point again to the evidence that this is this lack of grounding, the fact that we're all living lives that are so isolated from the earth is a major contributor to this epidemic of chronic disease.
Yes, the rats that were grounded were found to be healthier after a period of time than the ungrounded rats. Yeah. So what that suggests is that research needs. There's two levels of what normal is. There's a grounded normal and there's an ungrounded normal. So if animals are grounded during research, they're going to react differently than if they are not grounded. So the same thing obviously for humans. If humans go in for various studies, they're going to be different. They're going to have different levels of physiological reactions than people who are ungrounded. So this suggests a whole new level of what's normal.
So Martin, maybe you could let us know what sort of surfaces facilitate this. Obviously, walking outside barefoot on the grass and on the earth, and I would assume moist earth rather than a dry earth would be better for conductivity. But what about other sort of surfaces and their conductivity, and which are good for grounding or earthing and which are not?
Things that don't work, they're not conductive, is asphalt. I don't know what you call it in the UK, but asphalt, is
asphalt or
not
tarmac.
conductive. Yeah, exactly. And also wood is not conductive, wood. So if you walk on wood surfaces, if you walk on a deck at your house, your house has a deck, that's not conductive. So basically you got sand, gravel, grass, plain old dirt. Concrete is good. Concrete is good. And yeah, the more moist the surface, the better, but you can also be grounded by walking barefoot out in the desert. You don't have a desert in the UK. We have here in Southwest United States, but basically any natural surfaces outside. If you've ever walked along the beach, on a beach holiday, and you walked along the wet sand, or you've been in the water, the ocean water, that's the natural grounding that you can get. And so what we tell people who are skeptical, we say, if you have any chronic pain, go outside in your yard or go to a park, put your bare feet on the ground or walk barefooted for a half an hour or 45 minutes and measure your level of pain at the beginning and compare it to your level of pain at the end. You're going to notice the difference. You will become a believer that the earth has something very special, that the earth is a painkiller. That's what we tell people.
Great stuff. So actually walking on the beach in wet sand in contact with the sea, I would assume is probably almost optimal, isn't it? That must be the ultimate.
Oh, yeah.
And possibly also ponds and things like this, ponds and rivers.
Yeah, but natural surfaces. The sea is like it's the top. It's the best because there's so many minerals in the water and it's very conductive. But if you're in a lake or if you're in a river, that's also, if you're walking on sidewalk, on concrete, that's going to be conductive. Walking on the grass. If you're a golfer, go golf barefoot.
Indeed. So you've
if you're playing football, play it barefoot.
So you've alluded to some of the benefits there. Let's just see whether we've got the list complete. You mentioned obviously a reduction in pain due to the inflammation, and you also mentioned, just to remind the listeners for clarity, a sort of a balancing of the autonomic nervous system. Is it the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems that are balanced by this electrical grounding as well?
Yeah, we see a shift, a very quick shift from sympathetic stress to parasympathetic calm. We see that. We saw that in the premature infant study at Penn State University. Yeah. We saw that in a study with adults that Dr. SInatra did in 2011. We're seeing these, and there were two Polish researchers that also believed through their studies that grounding has a primary effect on the nervous system, from the brain, from the central nervous system to the autonomic nervous system to the peripheral nervous system, a significant influence on the function of the nervous system.
Okay. What about I've heard also that maybe it helps the thinning of the blood. Actually, I don't know whether it was Clinton Ober's research or Dr. SInatra, but I'm in some of the research for this chat we're having. I remember seeing an effect of literally red blood cells, being less coagulated, less stuck together, and more free flowing in the blood. Is that true?
No, you're absolutely right, Nigel. Dr. SInatra was involved in, I believe, in 2010 in a study where they grounded a number of subjects, healthy individuals, for 2 hours, and what they found was that they measured something called zeta potential. And the zeta potential, the function of red blood cells to repel each other. In other words, you want a strong negative charge on your red blood cells, the stronger the negative charge on red blood cells, the more they're able to repel each other.
Right.
And we found that there was a 270% improvement, strengthening of that negative charge as a result of grounding. And Dr. SInatra, a cardiologist, noted that people who have cardiovascular disease or have diabetes, their blood is inflamed, their blood is thick. When you're grounded, your blood has a natural thinning effect. There's a natural thinning effect because the red blood cells are able to repel each other more. There's more space, there's less clumping. So there's better blood flow through the whole system, including the small capillaries where blood gets out into the cells in the periphery. And so this is a huge effect. There was a doctor in Australia who found that just grounding people with a patch like this, but putting that patch on their feet. These are people who had diabetic neuropathy, they had numbness in the feet, that within an hour, their numbness level came down sufficiently. I mean, substantially, came down quite a bit. And he did this with 15 or 16 patients. So yes, we know that there's a big effect on blood, and very positive effect on blood. We caution people, though, if you're taking a blood thinning medication, it's probably not a good idea to ground yourself because you may have a compounded effect. So in that case, you really need to work with your doctor if you want to be grounded.
I've experimented with grounding over the last couple of years myself, and I've noticed an increase in energy. I don't know. I've changed a few variables in my lifestyle, so it's difficult to fairly attribute it directly to grounding. But I've heard that there's some anecdotal evidence from many other people that an almost literal increase in energy is also symptomatic of grounding. Is that your experience as well?
Yes, and this is a common feedback that we have, that people feel better, they have less pain, they feel calmer, they're going to be able to sleep more easily. So the better their sleep, the more energy and refreshed they're going to feel in the morning. This is a very common feedback. Now, what I'm speaking about here is being grounded indoors. And there's a number of products that have been made that with which you can ground yourself indoors. I have here in my hand this is an earthing mat. It's made, you can see it here perhaps. It's made of carbonized leatherette. This surface here is conductive, and it's connected with a wire to your outlet, to the outlet on your wall, the electrical outlet, but it's not running on electricity. Please don't think that it is. This plugs into the ground, into the earthing pin of your outlet, or the ground port in the United States. You say the ground port of a wall outlet. So it's picking up the Earth's energy, the grounding, the earthing system in your house or your apartment. And you can sleep on this. Have it in your bed, so you're sleeping grounded. So it's the same as if it's like a barefoot substitute. So if you're sleeping grounded, you're going to have a much deeper sleep. You're going to have better, deeper rest. And people wake up when they sleep grounded. They wake up feeling more refreshed. That's your experience.
Absolutely. So in order to address grounding, if people wanted to dive into the deep end here, is being grounded during sleep the optimal time? I mean, it's a time where your body is rejuvenating and rebuilding and repairing. That's probably the most effective time, I suppose, to actually make sure you're grounded, would you say?
Well, it's the easiest time because you're not doing anything.
Yeah.
Right?
So you can either use a mat. You can use a mat.
Yeah, you can use a mat. There are sheets. There are patches that you can use. These patches here that I have here on my palm, they're simple EKG patches that the doctor would use if you were going in to have your heart checked, and then it connects with a wire to the outlet. So there's different ways to be grounded indoors, which are like barefoot substitutes, like being barefoot outside. You're getting the same energy from the earth. And yes, if you can be grounded for 6 or 7 hours a night while you're sleeping, that's wonderful for the body. You're enhancing that whole repair and healing mechanism that's going on. So yeah, and you can also be grounded during the day if you're working at a computer. You can put the mat on the floor, put your bare feet on the floor, or put it in front of your favorite chair, or on the chair, sit on it. So there's all these different ways to be grounded indoors.
Sure. Yeah, I was going to say that's probably the next most important thing, isn't it? Because a lot of people spend many hours a day at a computer. I spend quite a few myself, and you know, if you're doing that indoors, it sounds like a grounding mat like that to put your bare feet on would be an excellent way of making sure that you're grounded for as much of the day as you can be. If, as you said, you know, I imagine that ideally we'd be grounded all of the time, but obviously that's impractical with a modern lifestyle. So sleeping, number one, and if you're working at a desk or anywhere where you're standing up, you could be using one of those mats you just showed us to make sure you're electrically connected to the earth.
Sure. Or if you're watching the telly, you could be there sitting on one of these mats or have your bare feet on it. Yeah, if you're sitting or sleeping, you can use one of these systems, and they work really well to ground you. Yes.
Fantastic.
And it'll make a big difference in your life.
Yes, I recall. So, in terms of resources, then, Martin, that people can go to check out and learn more of this. Obviously, apart from getting a copy of that fabulous book, Earthing: The Most Important Health Discovery Ever. Can you tell us a little about the Earthing Institute, and perhaps give us some places that listeners could go to look for more details?
Yeah, thank you, Nigel. If people want to learn more about it, yes, the book is full of jam-packed information. This is knowledge that's really never been collected before throughout history. And there's also we have an informational website, which is earthinginstitute.net, and you'll find all the research there in full. You'll find testimonials. We have an A to Z of testimonials there. We have advisories. We have what basic information about earthing, what conditions we know it can improve. Just a lot of information is there. So that's a great resource for finding.
Can we find the studies that Clinton Ober has done? Are they all referenced at the Earthing Institute as well?
They're all there. They can be opened and they can be read, and they're all there. Yes, sir.
Fantastic. So, any listeners in the United States, what companies can they go to acquire, you know, either grounding sheets or grounding patches or grounding mats? Do you have some suggestions there?
Right. The two websites that where products are available and have been designed by Clinton Ober are earthing.com, and the other one is www.groundtherapycenter.com, groundtherapycenter.com, and they'll find all products available there.
Fantastic.
Well, in the UK,
in the UK, there's Groundology, groundology.co.uk. That's a company that I've used to acquire grounding sheet, and I shall put all these details in the show notes, of course, for any listeners. So the information will all be collated there. So
there's one other website in the UK. It's equilibrauk.com. That's EQUILIBRA eauk.com. And both Groundology and Equilibra UK have the original products designed by Clint.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Martin. Absolutely wonderful to hear, the background around this really exciting phenomenon. I consider it one of the essential components to optimal health, as I'm sure you do from what you're saying. Wonderful to hear this education shared to the listeners. So much appreciation to that. Do you have any other closing statements or anything else that you'd like to say, or anywhere, how you could be contacted for further information or anything like that?
Just get grounded. To all your listeners, get grounded as soon as you can and stay grounded. This is not something that you do for one night and it's going to cure anything. Although we've had people who after one night of sleeping grounded, they're like new people the next day. The responses are different among different people. Some people dramatic overnight, some other people subtle and gradual. So keep that in mind, but just get grounded, reconnect to the planet, because the planet has marvelous healing properties.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Well, again, it's typical that, in the mainstream media, this will be ignored. There'll be plenty of naysayers. Obviously, the whole medical fraternity is totally set up to use drugs. It's addressing symptoms with drugs. There isn't this holistic approach. So you won't hear anything about this from your doctor, which is to be sure. But also I'd urge you to listeners to visit the website lawfulrebel.com for more information similar to this, where things are misrepresented and we're not told the truth by the mainstream medical fraternity. So check out the website for more stories there. Also, thank you so much for listening. And lastly, I do hope you'll join me again for another episode of Living Outside the Matrix.
Be the change you want to see.